I just absorbed that place. I absorbed the beauty of the rainforest there. And we did a couple of scenes and we ran around in loincloths, you know, pretending we were the Na'vi and the Avatar. And there's a difference between being out in the real world and then coming into this grey, desolate area and actually trying to have to, you know, remember what it was like in the water. So if you're swimming in here, if you're swimming on kind of just a rolling chair, your brain can kind of remember.
We got to rehearse a few of the scenes, and we got to rehearse with physical things because we knew that we were going to be going into a mocap stage, and we weren't going to, you know, you don't know how your foot lands in mud if you're just standing on cement. So your body reacts differently to things once you've actually gone out and done those things.
I was shooting them with an HD camera the entire time, just watching how they moved, how they behaved, how the light played on their faces, the light through the trees, if it was sunny, if it was rainy, if it was cloudy. And a lot of that fed my process, you know, on the visual side for how we would light these scenes later. So it was very, very instructive. But I think the biggest part of it that was valuable was just the kind of kinesthetic sense memory that allowed them to create. What did it smell like? What did it feel like? What did the trail feel like under your feet? Come on! So it was about making it real for the actors. It took us from 2005 to 2007 to get the performance capture system up and running and proven to work in a way that neither diluted nor augmented the actors' performance. And so the actors were convinced going in that what they did on the day that they did a scene was definitive, that that's what their CG character would be seen doing later. Told them, you're not doing a voice part, you're acting your character just as you would if there was a camera there. There just isn't a camera. So you have to think of it as CG makeup.
Let's dance.
I was on a quest for the Holy Grail, and the Holy Grail was to be able to reproduce full human emotion in a CG character. And of course, the thing we were afraid of is what people have sometimes called the dead eye effect, describing this strange disconnect that we have sometimes from CG characters. And I knew that Avatar would just fail utterly if we didn't crack this problem. And the idea that I had clung to for a long time was this idea of mounting a camera directly to the actor's head. So we started drawing this up, and Glenn Derry, his little ragtag team of engineers, started looking at how do we keep it light. So we wound up with a tight-fitting carbon fiber helmet that was molded to the actor's head.
So we've got this very wide-angle sort of data lens that's here on their face, but we have to be able to see the entire performance of the talent.
So we would shoot reference cameras of the actors, and these are a critical step in the virtual production process.
It's important to understand that the reference cameras and the virtual camera are two completely different things. The virtual camera shows us what the shot will look like with the CG characters and the world combined, because we can't see the fine nuances of the performance in the virtual camera. The reference cameras are absolutely critical for getting exactly the moment that we want. You got 5 takes. They're all going to be good because they're good actors, but there's going to be one take that's special, or maybe special for a moment. We need to know that. That's what the reference cameras are for. And then the animators take the reference footage, and they use it to make sure that they're not making a mistake.
Let me know when you're ready, Dave. I'd like to introduce some performers into the volume, please.
I had to take everything I learned in training and apply it to my first day. I had to ride a horse, jump off of him, appearing to be as graceful as possible, land, move like a Na'vi, and from that first moment when they set that horse and they let that thing go, instantly, Sute just jumped in my body and Laz went somewhere else.
What's happening?
You've got to swim pretty quickly, otherwise you're going to drown in there. And Jim makes you comfortable. You dive in, and it doesn't take you long to get rid of all the technical aspects.
I need your help.
You should not be here.
It's liberating. It's just you and the other person. Yeah, they've got dots on their face and a helmet cam and power packs, but you can still see their eyes, and it takes acting back to what it should be, which is trying to get something from the other person and vice versa.
I trusted you.
Trust me now, please.
What I can say is that every day I would go to work the same way I went to work for Star Trek or other movies that I've done before, and there was nothing different about what I was doing. Just the prep work. As opposed to going through hair and makeup, I went through dots, and then all of a sudden I was on the set and I was playing Neytiri. Jim says action. I don't know what happens. I at least have no idea that I'm wearing this. I feel like I'm blue and I'm 9 feet tall and I'm as sexy as hell. Like, I just totally forget.
Actors have said to me, you know, sort of half jokingly but a little nervous.
No, I think it actually kind of gives us wings.
And action. We use that sandbox, we use that spatial environment to do everything. It's where we created the sets. It's where we blocked the scenes. It's where we captured the actors. It's where we did all the stunt work. I mean, we had horses galloping around this place. We did everything in the volume. We came up with a number of methodologies for shooting some of these big aerial scenes. Start by, first of all, figuring out what the aerial choreography would be. So we thought, well, if we're going to talk about it, why don't we act it out in the volume? So we made little wire models of the various creatures and aircraft, put markers on them so the system would recognize them, and then we just go out there and fly them around.
Basically chasing each other, like kids playing with two toys. This was a very, very instant way to do it. We could block it very quickly, understand whether or not the overall performance worked before we ever even gave it to an animator and said, now that has to be legitimized.
The performance capture system would record the motion that Jim was getting. Those flight paths were then used to animate the Banshees against, the Samsons against, the Dragon against.
The integration of animation was another headache, you know. In and of itself, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but we had to take it through phases and work out a pipeline. So what we would have is either a puppeteered version where myself and Jim doing flight paths, or we'd have creature performers.
Oh, shut up and fly straight!
We really found that flying the Banshee was the hardest problem. So we created a manually operated gimbal rig that they could balance on, and we'd ask the actors to perform to the timing and movement of the flight path. So if their Banshee banked to the right, the rider had to do the opposite to maintain a center of gravity.
Bang! Level. Flare. Flap. 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 Jump.
And when you see them flying these things, they're working hard. And they used to be just in absolute agony the day after a flight scene.
The biggest set pieces for the stunt department really have been this thing that we call the beanstalk. Jim wanted the actual beanstalk to be created. So these people actually had to climb it as if we were climbing it on a cliff. Climb up there and then get around to the left side. Come on, climb up and then climb right around to the left side right away. And so we put them on wires and we put 2 sandbags, which would take about 40 pounds off the person. They can climb it a little bit faster than they normally would.
You need to build all of these physical cues for the actors and for Jim to work with so that the digital world starts to take on the character of the real world.
Stop! That's how you wrestle a Banshee.
We would have to build layouts, which were the physical interactive set pieces. So that if you saw the Na'vi climbing a mountain, we had to create, let's say, a 20-degree grade. If they were climbing a vine, we dropped ropes down and you'd see them climbing a vine. So it was all very interactive, yet there was no environment there. There was no jungle.
And we can be very improvisational because we're not bound by the set.
There's nothing on the set. It's a gray set. But the difference is that a big boulder would take an hour and a half with a bulldozer and crew to move it. In our world, it literally takes a second. We select it and move it. And if he says it's too big, we scale it down.
Everything in our environments is modular.
Okay, bring the camera around.
Any plant, any mountain, any exotic alien life form can be completely moved and configured and sized and scaled with a push of a button.
The thing that's amazing about it is that we don't wait for lights. Things that you normally wait for on a film set have been switched over to computers and to digital this and digital that.
If I want to whistle up a tree or a mountain or anything, I can do it very quickly. And there were often times when we'd come in to work a scene on a given day, and we'd get some ideas, and we'd run with that.
He likes actors, which is really helpful, particularly for something like this where you're not seeing the physical set. It's really important to have the kind of director who can lead you and let you know what's happening, and then you can react to that. His detail is spectacular, so he can create the picture for you that you're not seeing.
We would create very rough animation in the virtual production stage for our creatures.
It's a territorial threat display. Do not run, or he'll charge.
So what do? Dance with it?
Jim would be there with a pole and going after Sam, and he'd be representing the hammerhead.
We did an animation pass on that just to figure out what we wanted this creature to be. Jim shot Sam doing Jake's reaction.
What about this one? Run? Don't run, what?
Jim could play back that animation on stage as if the creature were there, because in his camera, he would see it, so it becomes just another performer.
So if I have a good overlap, then I can play them and get them into their position. Yeah, of course.
So he could direct Sam how to play off of that, because again, in the virtual world, it's all there for him.
Run! Definitely run!
We thought we learned everything in the first year of research and development because we had done a test and based all of our reasoning on a scene with only 2 people in it. We hadn't done a scene with 10 people or 100 people in it, and those represented more difficulties in virtual production.
If we got past 5 characters, it would create a problem just capturing the motion. Never mind getting them to run with fully fledged sets and lighting. We just hit a ceiling, man. We taxed the hardware to the max, and the software at that point was untested. It was not built for what we were trying to do. So every time we pushed, it crashed.
Got no save. No save. Let's go again, please.
Here's an example of a scene that almost broke the system.
Made of a lot of different elements. You can see there are horses, different performances of the principals and the crowds that were on the side. They were all combined together in one shot.
And we're selecting specific actions and syncing them all up so that they all play relative to whatever's happening. This is like reinventing the wheel. It was really challenging, I have to say. I've never been so challenged on anything.
So here we are 2 years into making Avatar, which is longer than it took us to do all of Titanic right through finishing the movie. And we're still 6 months away from starting an entire live-action movie. And it had nothing to do with the virtual production. It was pretty daunting. One of the big challenges of designing this movie was that you have 2 completely separate worlds coming together with 2 completely separate modes of technology and 2 completely separate aesthetics. You've got the Na'vi, who are a weaving culture, and you've got the humans who work with technology, with metals and electronics and with composite carbon fibers, all of this sort of thing, advanced military weaponry. And we had basically different artists worked on these 2 different cultures.
We brought in people like Ty Ruben Ellingson, and Ben Proctor, and Paul Osmo, who all worked on that type of material.
Most directors are content to have something kind of look cool, and Jim, that's just not his world at all. When it comes to mechanics and man-made objects or bits of technology or bits of architecture, vehicles, all this sort of stuff, he wants it all to work. He wants it all to make sense. He wants to see an engineering mindset was put into it, a practical mindset. Why is this handle here? What is this piston doing? It's not about strict sort of art direction and cosmetics. It's a more thoughtful design process, and he holds us all to that standard.
All the way from Earth to Hell's Gate, it had to have a human scale to it. It had to have a human livability in it. Jim wanted this contrast of gray tones and kind of depressed look to everything. It looked livable. It looked like it had been there for a long time, or it looked like it kind of gone through the ringer a bit.
Of course, I love all that hardware stuff. I'm an unrequited engineer. I worked with Ty very closely to make sure that the amp suit's shoulder motion would work and was thought out in terms of the various articulations and where the servos would go. Range of motion was all thought through, and where the power supplies would go, where the servos would go, and all that.
More looking low and back.
When you're approaching things, even inanimate objects, oftentimes you'll find if you listen carefully to what the director's saying, or if you just think about it in terms of the story, they do have to have a narrative quality to them. For example, Scorpion, which is one of our small attack vehicles. It's called the Scorpion. You know, Jim came up with that name, of course, which is an angry, fighting little insect. And in the course of this film, this thing is a deadly force to reckon with.
Scorpions, pursue and destroy.
So you want to build that into your design. You want this thing to look aggressive and arrogant and powerful, badass little killing scorpion. That's the shapes, that's the marks you make, and that's what you hope to get on screen.